All right, let's talk about Oscar Wilde. We're going to dive into the absolutely brilliant, beautiful, and in the end, deeply tragic life of a man who famously said he put his genius not into his art, but into his life itself. And what a life it was.
I mean, what a line, right? This is what he supposedly told a customs officer in New York. And honestly, whether it's true or not doesn't really matter. It just perfectly sums up the persona he built for himself, so witty, so bold, and just completely sure of his own brilliance. He was basically a rock star before rock stars were even a thing.
And at his peak, wow, Oscar Wilde wasn't just in London society, he was the center of its universe. His plays, total smash hits. Every witty thing he said was repeated in all the fanciest parties. He wasn't just a writer, he was a living, breathing work of art, and people could not get enough.
But here's the twist, and it's a shocking one. In what felt like the blink of an eye, the brightest star in London just fell from the sky. So how does that happen? How does someone so famous, so loved, so seemingly untouchable end up utterly destroyed? Well, that's the story we're here to unravel. To really understand Wilde's spectacular fall, you've got to first understand the philosophy that fueled his rise. It was a whole movement built around one thing: beauty.
So, Wilde was the poster boy for this thing called aestheticism. The idea at its heart was pretty simple, but for the super-moral, kind of stuffy Victorian era, it was totally revolutionary. It basically said, hey, art doesn't need to teach you a lesson, it doesn't have to make you a better person. Its only job is to be beautiful.
Now, this famous line from his novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, sounds a little insulting, doesn't it? But for Wilde, calling art useless was the biggest compliment you could give it. It meant art was free. It didn't have to do the boring, everyday work of being practical. It could just exist in its own world of pure, perfect beauty.
And here's the big paradox, the great irony of it all. For a guy who preached that art shouldn't have a moral, his one and only novel is one of the most haunting moral tales ever written. It's a huge warning sign about what happens when a life chasing only pleasure goes horribly, monstrously wrong.
The whole book hinges on this creepy split, right? You've got Dorian, who stays young and beautiful on the outside no matter what terrible things he does. And then you have this hidden painting that takes the hit for him, growing uglier with every single sin. It's such a powerful metaphor for living a double life, a theme that, tragically, was about to play out in Wilde's own story.
And just like his art, Wilde's own double life is really where the downfall begins. And it all started, as these things so often do, with a passionate, all-consuming affair.
So, in comes Lord Alfred Douglas, who everyone called Bosie. He was young, he was gorgeous, he was an aristocrat. Their relationship was fiery and intense, but it was also incredibly reckless. You have to remember, this was a time when just being gay was a serious crime, and their affair pulled Wilde deeper and deeper into that dangerous world.
Now, this affair made Bosie's father absolutely furious. And this wasn't just any dad. This was the Marquis of Queensberry, a famously aggressive guy who literally wrote the rules for modern boxing. He got it in his head that he had to destroy Wilde to save his son. And this was the spark that lit the whole powder keg. Queensberry went to Wilde's private club and left this calling card. Notice the spelling mistake. It was a public, nasty, and very deliberate insult. A direct challenge. And in that moment, Wilde felt he had no choice but to fight back.
So, pushed on by Bosie, who wanted revenge on his father, Wilde made the single worst decision of his entire life. He sued the Marquis for libel. He took a private fight and turned it into a massive public spectacle.
And the speed of his ruin? It's just breathtaking. We're talking about 45 days. In a little over a month, Wilde went from being the one suing, a famous artist defending his honor, to being the one in the dock, accused of a crime, and then a convicted criminal. The entire thing backfired in the most spectacular way imaginable.
But in the middle of his own trial, Wilde has this one incredible moment of defiance. The lawyer grills him about the love that dare not speak its name, and instead of backing down, Wilde gives this beautiful, soaring speech defending love between men. Apparently, the courtroom burst into applause. It was a stunning moral victory that completely sealed his doom in the eyes of the law.
The verdict came back guilty, and the sentence was just brutal. It was designed to break him. 2 years of hard labor, the absolute maximum penalty they could give him. For a man who lived his life surrounded by beauty and wit and art, it was basically a death sentence.
So there he was, in the horrible silence of Reading jail prison. His name, his money, his family, all gone. But even in that darkness, his genius found a way to make one last, incredible statement.
I mean, just look at that number. The prison governor showed him a small kindness and allowed him a pen and paper. And what did he do with it? He wrote a single letter, a 55,000-word letter to Bosie. He called it De Profundis, which is Latin for from the depths, and it really was.
The letter is really a story in two parts. The first half is this raw, bitter, painful takedown of Bosie, blaming him for everything that happened. But then something shifts. The second half is this deep, spiritual journey where Wilde stops pointing fingers and starts looking inward, trying to find some kind of meaning in all his suffering. And this is the incredible realization he comes to. He figures out that his biggest mistake wasn't his love of pleasure. It was that he only sought pleasure and ran from any kind of pain or sorrow. By staying only on the sunlit side of life, he'd missed out on the wisdom you can only find in the shadows.
Wilde eventually got out of prison, but he was a completely broken man, and he would never live long enough to see his name cleared or his work get the respect it truly deserved.
He spent his last few years just drifting around France, totally broke, his health completely ruined from prison. And in 1900, he died in a cheap hotel room in Paris. Just a quiet, lonely end for a life that had been so loud and so full of light. He was only 46 years old.
But of course, that's not where his story ends. Not really. Over the next century, his legacy just exploded. His great letter from prison was finally published in full. And by the time the laws in Britain changed, just a few years later, Oscar Wilde had gone from a disgraced criminal to a celebrated martyr, a global icon for gay rights.
So it leaves us with this one last big question. Wilde always said he put his talent into his writing, but his genius into his life. So in the end, was that very life, with all its glory, all its mistakes, and all its terrible suffering, his final and most tragic masterpiece?